Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is the start to a fantastic Cryptid Hunter series by the wonderful mind of Dogs34567. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled I'm a Cryptid Hunter, and my last mission was in the Nahanni Valley. Let's get straight into that. So, a little about myself before I get into the story. My name is Hector Roanoke, and I've been a cryptid hunter for about 20 years now. I have an extensive military background, and I enlisted into the US Navy at the age of 18. My job was an FMF corpsman for the platoon of Marine Raiders. They taught me everything from shooting and fighting to the basic survival skills that I still use to this day. Eventually, my time in the service came to an end after 6 years due to personal reasons. Now, before I tell you about what happened in Nahanni Valley, I must tell you I have hunted every cryptid you could possibly name. I got the job through some connections. It was easy with my military background, even though the first job almost made me quit on the spot. It's hard being a rookie and hunting an ancient Wendigo who has the strength of 10 men and the attitude of a pissed off bear who's been awakened from hibernation. The pay was good though, and so that made up for it. Anyways, I was given a task of going on an expedition into the Nahanni Valley because out of the last group of hunters, who were 6 strong and only 2 made it out, and one of those regrettably didn't include my friend Saul. Well, me and Saul had known each other since I was in the military, and we were battle buddies, and there was no way I was going to accept that he was gone. And so I volunteered for the job, and I was given it without a second thought. Now, I'm sure some of you have heard the kind of mysterious, unexplainable things that go on in the Nahanni Valley, from headless men wandering the forest to outright sightings of ancient dinosaurs. An expedition was to only last 7 days and no more because of the safety reasons, they said. But I didn't care. I was determined to find Saul and the other missing hunters. On the first day that I arrived at the valley, I started to make shelter in a cave by the freshwater source, and everything was going well. At sunset, I started to hear weird noises, like the wailing of a woman mixed with the call of a rabbit. At first, I thought it was a skinwalker. I wasn't worried one bit, but something was off about the way it was wailing. Skinwalkers cannot mimic animals and humans at the same time. The wailing kept getting closer, and so I took cover in some nearby foliage. What I saw shook me on a spiritual level. The creature was tall and black, not just the skin, but it was like a walking shadow. It had very long extremities with the sharpest of antlers I'd ever seen mounted atop of its head. But the most chilling part was its eye sockets. They were empty, but gave off a strange red hue, like a flame in the dark. Its hair reached well past its shoulders. I quickly recognized what it was, a stick Indian. And if it wasn't for me picking up on what it actually was, this definitely wouldn't have been a bad fight to pick. I laid still until the thing passed over me. After it passed, I made a note to myself to keep my guard up after sunset. If stick Indians are here, I'd hate to see what else could be lurking around here. After my experience with the stick Indian, I decided to pack up and move camp to another location. I hiked about 3 miles down the river and found myself a nice spot by a fallen tree. I set up camp and went hunting and started cooking the game that I caught later on that day. I soon went to sleep and woke up at about 4 hours early. I left my tent to take a leak, and after I finished, I got done bleeding the snake, and I heard a twig snap in the distance. I quickly ran to my camp and grabbed my hunting tomahawk to confront whatever was making a noise this late in the woods. And that was when I saw it. I was a man, but this was no ordinary man. He was about 6'6" and fit as a fiddle. I could recognize him from anywhere. He was one of the missing hunters. I put my tomahawk onto my waist and approached him, but I noticed he was facing with his back towards me. And then it dawned upon me that no, only was his back pointing towards me, but his head was missing. He was walking headless around the forest. The sheer sight filled me with anger, sadness, and fear at the same time. No, I didn't know what I was dealing with. I slowly crept away and kept a big fire all that night, with my tomahawk in one hand and my gun in the other. And what I saw that night really made me realize that I was in foreign territory. I decided to go on a hike around the area to get a better idea of the landscape. And the area was beautiful. The birds were starting to chirp again. Eventually I'd hiked until sunset and went back to camp to rest and eat. After eating, I noticed that my campsite had footprints all around it, but they weren't normal-sized footprints. They were miniature, no bigger than a 4-year-old's footprints. I noticed one of the tents shaking, and I readied my tomahawk, and when it opened it, a short creature, no more than 3 foot tall, jumped out at me and scurried off into the forest. Damn near gave me a heart attack, but I couldn't help but laugh. Eventually, I settled off and went to sleep, laughing after that experience. Frickin' little people, they're not dangerous, but they sure are noisy. I woke up at the crack of dawn to go fishing. I got tired of eating rabbit and pheasant meat every night, and so I tried to mix it up a little. I put some rabbit foot on the line and just to see if I'd get lucky and bag a big meaty fish to cook tonight over the fire. After a few hours, I got a bite and tried to reel it in, but it wouldn't budge. I thought I'd snagged on a log until all the line on the rod was gone in an instant, and something in the water was starting to stir. I quickly decided to take cover behind a big rock and watch the monster of a serpent breach the water's surface. I wanted to say it was Ogopongo, but something about the spines were different, and this one seemed to be a juvenile. I stayed behind the rock until it was gone, just in case, and then moved up 5 miles downstream to fish there, just in case the bastard was still lurking around. I caught a few salmon, and so the trip wasn't completely disappointing. After seeing the general lay of the area, I started looking for clues indicating what happened to the team. My mission took me 8 miles into the valley. It was truly a beautiful sight to behold. Crystal clear waters, beautiful plants, and some of the most beautiful flowers you'll ever see. Eventually, I came upon a destroyed camp. Now, nothing immediately stood out to me until I found 2 human bodies. They were mangled beyond human comprehension in what looked like an act of brutality that I'd never seen in my life before. I nearly started crying thinking about the pain they went through before dying. I gave them a proper burial and prayed to God. The same thing didn't happen to Saul. Eventually, I returned to camp with a heavy heart and a feeling that every move I made was being carefully calculated by something. Eventually, I fitfully slept with a gun loaded with wolfsbane in a round in the chamber that night. Wolfsbane is hard to find, but boy does it pack a punch against the majority of cryptids that are out there. I've come to the realization that I'm being followed by something smart I went to the nearby river to wash myself, and when I came back to my campsite, it was destroyed. I thank God I took my weapons with me, and just in case that Oggy I saw wanted a piece of me. The thing that destroyed my campsite left footprints bigger than any humans I'd ever seen. I was definitely a humanoid in origin, but how human really worried me. Usually humanoid creatures such as Bigfoot and Sasquatch, well, they don't mess with humans unless you are in their territory. And whatever this thing was, it wasn't being territorial. It was trying to make an example. It looked to be more out of rage than to protect something that you own. You own. I pondered what it could be, but eventually I gave up and started sharpening my tomahawk just in case the bastard came back. After that encounter, I made a makeshift camp out of some foliage and branches around the forest floor and started a campfire. I knew the bastard was waiting for me to go to sleep, and so I spent all day prepping. I'm going to be honest with you. In all my years of cryptid hunting, I've never seen anything like this. This was the night that made me, a seasoned cryptid hunter, fear for his life. After all that day prepping, I was sitting at the campfire when I saw it. I had never seen anything like it before. It was tall, about 8.5 feet. It looked human, but it was all wrong. It didn't look like a regular human. It looked like a cross between the ancient race Gigantopithecus and an ancient human. Its burning amber eyes that flowed in the dark, looking at me with such hate and anger. I could feel the killing intent exhuming from its body. I hurried to my feet with my gun and tomahawk in hand, and it threw something at me that landed at my feet and smiled. I kicked it over with my foot to inspect it, and it was the fucking stick Indian. This thing had killed the stick Indian and threw its head at me. Some sort of sick display of power, I would guess. I looked back up at it, and it was sadistically smiling at me. I never felt so much fear in my life. I stood my ground, waiting for it to make a move, and then I noticed that it wasn't advancing anymore. I looked at the fire, and then at it. Its expression then fell. To this day, I don't know what that thing was, but I thank God that I had a big fire going. I took a seat, and it did the same at the forest's edge. We stared at each other, me not letting the fire go out and it not willing to advance with the fire roaring. We carried on staring at each other until the break of dawn, and then at the blink of an eye, it was gone. And quickly, I left that place and told my superiors what had happened. Now they told me that there was stories of the Nahanni wild men of the valley of the Nahanni, and that I was lucky to make it out of there alive. But I never did find Saul. One day I will go back there, but until now, I just thank God that I'm alive to tell this tale. I'll tell you some more stories about my career, but I'll have to wrap it up here. I just got a call about going on a mission with some agents to investigate Skinwalker Ranch. If I make it back alive, I'll tell you the details about that hunt too. Until then, farewell, and be safe out there. You never know what really lurks in the deep, unexplored regions of this earth. My most terrifying hunt as a cryptid hunter. Let's get straight into that. Alright, hey guys, it's me, Hector again. Lately I've been getting a lot of requests to tell the most moment that was terrifying that I've ever had as a cryptid hunter. I'm going to be honest with you guys, this was one of the toughest nights for me as a cryptid hunter. And let me tell you where it happened. It was in my early years. I had just gotten off a mission to deal with an ancient werewolf that I beat with my blessed silver tomahawk and a silver machete, with liquid wolfsbane on the blade. And so I was feeling like a badass. I was feeling like I could take on anything the world could throw at me. I was your typical rookie. I acted on action and impulse instead of thought and feeling. I got a mission from my superiors to go to the desert in Arizona to investigate a case of hikers turning up with the lower part of their body, heart, brain, and intestines missing. Now, after reading the case, I thought, must be a run-of-the-mill skinwalker. And so I packed my hunting gear and headed on out. It took me 4 hours to get to the desert, and I made a camp in a miniature cave with a nice source of water by it. I started a fire so I could start cooking the food that I brought with me. Some bison steak with a side of sweet potatoes, my favourite. I decided I would start looking for evidence tomorrow. I went to sleep and had a strange and very weird dream that night. I dreamt that I was looking at my tent that night. Later, I hiked 4 miles from my campsite and I came upon a body. And this was a male body. Could have been no older than 24. He was black and must have been of Native American descent. In his heart, he had an ancient-looking knife sticking out. His tongue was missing, and the most disturbing, his genitals had been mutilated. His face showed the amount of pain he was in before he died. I closed his eyes and eventually gave him a proper burial. I took the knife as evidence, and on it the word was Adana Quatsidi. I knew that word. It meant hate in Cherokee, and someone or something had killed this poor man in an act of sick hatred. I'm not going to lie, this had shook me quite a bit. I continued on being careful, because I could have sworn that while I was burying him, I heard faint whispers in the wind that chilled me to the bone. The sun was going down and I decided to go back to camp. That night, I dreamt of myself watching my tent again, except I was getting closer. The next day, I woke up to a terrible sight. Something had mounted a dead fox on a cactus, skinned it and left it in front of my tent. I thought to myself, this isn't your ordinary skinwalker. To be honest, I didn't know what this was. I got my gear and headed on out for another investigation, while watching my back the whole time. I got back at night to the cave to see that my camp had been ransacked, and the thing that had done it had left footprints. Now these footprints shifted from animals to a man's in a disturbing fashion. I followed them to an ancient-looking temple that looked to be of Mayan origin. I walked on in and was immediately filled with fear. The walls. Oh God, the walls. They were decorated with the crucified bodies of humans. Their eyes were missing. The floors were painted with the blood of the poor victims of this creature. It had also took the skulls out of his victims and mounted them onto a stick with the rest of their skeletal system, like some sick scarecrow, and the bodies were just so decomposed that even maggots wouldn't even dare touch them. I've never seen so much evil in a place. And this place oozed black magic. I knew deep down I had to stop this thing, whatever it was. I made myself progress, and there I saw it, sitting on the throne of human skulls, eating a bowl of human hearts and a hoy chevaux. This was an evil sorcerer who can transform himself or herself into a supernatural animal. Usually a goat, dog or deer, in order to prey upon livestock, but this one had gotten bold and started to prey upon humans. This thing had migrated from southern Mexico through unknown means and taken up a refuge in an ancient Mayan temple in Arizona. This half-man, half-beast creature with burning red eyes stared into my soul. It made my spirit twitch. I quickly took out an arrow and shot it in the shoulder. I didn't like that. It pounced on me with such ferocity. I thought I was done for. It grabbed me by my neck and looked into my eyes. I slowly felt my soul being consumed by this monster. I think I stabbed it into the stomach with my machete, and that caused it to reel back in pain due to the wolfsbane. This thing had to have lived hundreds of years studying black magic, so I knew I had to make this quick or things were bound to turn ugly. I shot one last arrow into its body, and it collapsed and took off into a deeper part of the temple. And that was when I saw the features of it. It looked like a baboon crossed with a silverback gorilla. It was easily 6 foot tall, with long black claws and jet black fur, sharp, jagged teeth. I could tell that the poor bastard of a warlock had lost its human form long ago. Eventually I caught up with it and almost ended its suffering when it uttered ancient dialect, and then the horror show truly began. The bodies fell from the wall and started advancing towards me. "Oh shit," I said as so readied my tomahawk and machete. It was a bloody fight that lasted 2 hours, and I eventually collapsed to the floor after the last zombie and was overcome by a dark void. And that's when I knew that this thing had taken the fight to my subconscious. I should have known all along that this was the thing watching me sleep in my tent, and that I was looking through its eyes on those nights that I had those dreams. It was then the bastard staring, using my own thoughts against me. It appeared and took the form of my great-grandpa. It impersonated him to try to get to me. Tears came to my eyes and rage filled my body. I fought this thing with all of that rage I had. I threw my weapons away and reverted to using my fists. I was a machine. I was going to town on this thing, and then I woke up, and it was dead. I bagged the big bastard and used some minerals around the area, so I made a makeshift explosion and blew the temple sky high. The evil energy in that place could not be allowed to surge through this land, and so I purified it the best way I could. And I burned the piece of shit warlock's heart. I put his ashes in a silver urn, blessed by a Native American chief, and then stored it somewhere where no one could ever access it. I reported to my seniors, and I decided to request time off after that hunt, and it took a lot out of me. I was granted leave and went to go visit my great-grandfather's grave. I paid my respects and I left a black rose upon his grave. After that hunt, I started to be more analytical of situations instead of act now and ask questions later. As much as I hate to admit it, it helped me grow as a hunter. It taught me a valuable lesson. In the end, to never take anyone in your life for granted, and I'm grateful for my great-grandfather. He taught me everything. Everything I knew, and I miss him every day. Well, that's all for me now, and if you want to hear more of my stories, let me know. I'll post some more, but for now, I think it's best if I get some time to myself. I really need it. Until then, I'll see you later, and thanks for listening. Wow. Absolutely awesome, chest-pounding stuff by the wonderful Dogs34567. A big thank you for allowing me to narrate your story on the show, and I really do look forward to more of your work. Guys and girls, as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR? I hope you're all having a great start to the week and are looking forward to the weekend even more. And friends and family are well. But above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.